Function is a relation in which every input or x value has exactly one output or y value. And this is best seen by looking at some examples. So for every input to have exactly one output, in a table, we're looking for x's that are repeated for something not to be a function. So if x's are not repeated, then the table does represent a function. So in this first example of a function, you can see -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2 are all different x values. This table example that is not a function, the x value of 2 is repeated with different y values. So that means 2 goes to 5 and 2 also goes to 7, but every input can have exactly one output, so this second one is not a function. Second example of a function, we'll look at the x values. The x values here are -5, 2, and -1 in this collection of points. So there are no repeated x values. In the second example that is not a function, the x values are -1, -1, and -1 with different y values. Since they're repeated y values, this is not a function. We can also determine if a relation is a function or not by looking at function rules or looking at their equations. So this third example that is a function, if we plug in any x value, we should get out exactly one y value. So for example, let's plug in x equals 0 to this rule. That would give us y equals 4 times 0 minus 10, or y equals 0 minus 10, so y equals -10. Since the x value, x equals 0, gave exactly one output, y equals -10, this is a function. This third example that is not a function, let's do the same thing and plug in x equals 0. That would give us y squared equals 0 plus 9, or y squared equals 9. But now if we square root both sides to solve for y, we would get that y could be 3, because 3 squared is 9, but y could also be -3. So the x value x equals 0 gives two possible outputs, y equals -3 and also y equals +3. But a function can have exactly one output, so this is not a function. To determine if we have a function from a graph, we use what's called the vertical line test. So any vertical line drawn on the graph crosses the graph at most one time, means that we have a function. So in this first example of a function, this is example 4 of a function, if we start drawing vertical lines, no matter where we draw a vertical line, we cross the graph only one time. So this is a function. But in this fourth example that is not a function, if we draw a vertical line here, we cross the graph 3 times, so this is not a function. There are places where we would cross the graph once, but we only need the vertical line test to fail one time. Look at one more example of graphs where we have a function and one graph that is not a function using the vertical line test. So this fifth example that is a function, no matter where we draw the vertical line, cross the graph one time. So this is a function. This fifth example that is not a function, if we draw a vertical line here, we're okay because we cross the graph only one time, but as soon as we draw one over the circle, we cross the graph twice, so this is not a function.